We'll begin. I'm Alaina Feldman. I'm the director of the Mishkin Gallery at Baruch College, City University of New York, and I'm the co-curator of our current exhibition, Taxonomies of Power, Photographic Encounters at the State Silk Museum, Tbilisi. This is the final week of the exhibition on view in New York. So if you are in New York City and you haven't seen the show yet, I encourage you to come and visit us on 22nd and Lexington. And if by chance you miss it, you have another chance because the exhibition will go to the State Silk Museum this fall, which we're very, very excited about. So today's talk is going to focus on the special collection of black and white photographs that are currently on view. They were printed in only 2024, just a few months ago, but they were digitized in 2022, and they were taken with glass plate negatives in the mid-20th century. They are, in my opinion, very elegant, very evocative, and they tell us not only about the life cycle of the silkworm, but about ways that we look at animals and how we've made sense of the natural world, in addition to how nature and empire might coalesce. So today I'm very honored to be joined by my fellow panelists, Nina Akhvlediani, Olaf Nicolai, and Mariam Shergelashvili. This event is generously co-organized with Goethe-Institut in New York, so special thanks to them and their curator, Zach Feldman. Just to give you a little run of show, each panelist will speak about their relationship to this very special photo collection and the State Silk Museum. And then we'll open it up to a Q&A. We're expecting today's event to be about an hour long. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Or we will, again, open it up to everyone at the end. So just feel free to, unmute yourself. We're a small group today. So I think we can really dig deep into some of the questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelist. Mariam Shergelashvili is the co-curator of the exhibition, along with myself, and an independent researcher, an exhibition curator at the State Silk Museum in Tbilisi, Georgia. Her work focuses on research and analysis of diverse contemporary visual art practices. She's initiated a wide variety of research projects, educational activities, exhibitions, seminars, and lectures. She is actively working to develop non-formal educational platforms by researching curatorial and theoretical practices in collaboration with creative individuals, museums, and other kinds of institutions. Among her recent projects are the curatorial artistic platform Unarchived Semiotics, which she founded just recently in 2022, and the social art project Tan Kmovani about noise pollution and sound ecology, which she initiated just also recently in 2023. We're very excited to have Mariam digitally and to involve her in the exhibition in this talk. She's also the co-editor of the publication that coincides with the exhibition. Olaf Nicolai is an internationally renowned German artist who employs a conceptual approach in his work with diverse media. He emphasizes the material forms of objects to stimulate reflection processes. He took part in Documenta 10 and was awarded the Karl Schuska Prize for Radiokunst in 2017 for his Documenta 14 contribution. In 2015, Nicolai represented Germany at the 56th Venice Biennale and conducted the 7-month-long performance installation Giro on the roof of the German pavilion. In 2021, his 24-hour film Marx was screened simultaneously in 16 institutions worldwide at the respective local time, including in Tbilisi, at the ICA in London, at Haus der Kunst in Munich, Fogo Island, Villa Aurora in Los Angeles, and the Garage Museum in Moscow. Totally impressive. Nicolai currently lives and works in Berlin and holds a professorship at the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. And he joined us today from Athens, where he's installing a recent exhibition. And finally, Nina Akhvlediani is an independent curator and publisher. She co-founded Kona Books, which is a very important Tbilisi-based publishing house, and she co-directs the Posta de Kona bookshop as well. She leads an independent archive practice called DINEBA, and since 2023 has been on the advisory board of the DINEBA in Tbilisi. So welcome, everyone. Thank you again to our wonderful panelists. We'll begin with Mariam, followed by Olaf, and then followed by Nina, and they have some visuals to present as well. So Mariam, take it away.
Thank you, Alaina. Thank you, everyone. I'm really honored to be part of this panel discussion. And since we are limited with the timing, I will try to briefly introduce our institution, State Silk Museum, which is like main focus for us, not only for the show, but also for the research and further collaborations. We are all together, included somehow. Yeah, I just try to share my screen. Okay. And yeah, share the presentation. So I think it's now in the full screen mode, right? And me, myself, thank you, Alaina, for introducing. I'm working at the State Silk Museum as an exhibition programs curator already more than 12 years. And it's like my pleasure to plan all these collaborations and to be involved in all the international projects, which we are doing mostly like intensively after 2016. And I will just start to introduce the history of this institution. The State Silk Museum itself, founded in 1887, and it was like initially was the museum from the very beginning, but not only, because it was the huge sericultural station, huge complex in the region, and it's called the Caucasian Sericultural Station. And mainly this complex was not only preserving the knowledge about the sericulture, but it was also actively involved to do different educational purposes to develop the field in the region. And it was also functioned as a research center of silk making. The first founders, it's very interesting that time when Russia Empire is the ruling the country, and they had this ambitious rule that ambitious project that to develop the sericulture in Georgia, but it's also worthily to mention that silk production in Georgia has more like roots in the back to the history, because it started in 5th century and initiated by the Georgian king Vakhtang Gorgasali. But this institution do the like more regional research and also promotion, but they have the focus of doing so based on the European experience in the sericulture. For example, the institution was especially built as a model of Lyon sericulture station. What you see on the right side, this is the old image of exposition and display, and it's worth to mention that the furniture itself was designed especially for the specific collection. And yeah, this is the original view how it was looked like from in the 19th century. This is the facade of the building from the old photo documentation, and as you see, it's like a very eclectic style. Eastern and Western influences, also Prussian influences are present in the building facade. But mainly architect was Polish, Alexander Szymkiewicz, who designed the whole building, not only the museum building, but all the other 23 building which were allocated in the neighborhood of the museum area. To go through to the collection, it's worth to mention that we have variety of the objects. Mainly they are objects related to the silk and sericulture and silk production, but it's really diverse, including the cocoons, silkworm biology, textile, photos, mulberry trees, and tree specimens, dyes, and all the knowledge, we can say, that is preserved in a very diverse way, and it's all about the silk making and the product of the textile. And it's also worth to mention that the collection itself, it's not only presenting the locality, not only the Georgian side or only Caucasian side, but there are the variety from 50 different countries. And this is where we are proud of, and like it's very precious for us. For example, what you see on the slide here, it's one of our precious collection of silk carrying containers, and they are also visually very beautiful, but functionally very important, because these containers, we are used to export the silkworm eggs, and they are perforated to give the birth of the silkworms. So it's a very precious collection, just to give you one example, but on our website, there are more. As I mentioned already, the history started from the Russian Empire, but then after the short time getting the country independence in 1918, then very soon Soviet regime overtook the country again, and during the Soviet time, the complex was totally loose its function as a complex, because mostly the main buildings, not only the main building as the museum, but the other buildings related to the silk production, they were just destroyed, and only 2 buildings were still existing, and it was also functional in the Soviet time. And this is the museum, which is also now functioning as a museum, but during Soviet time, it was functioned as a research institute. What you see on this slide is the library, and still we are preserving very unique books, and our library was the authentic part of the museum from the very beginning. This is how it looked several years ago. And some books we are preserving. Usually it's a variety of the books, but mostly it covers the natural science and different languages. This is not very recent image, but like more contemporary image of the museum. And it's worth to mention that we are still having the ongoing already 4-year rehabilitation, which will be hopefully finalized very soon. And we will have the ability to reopen our museum in October 2024. And we are really very much focusing to really preserve the authentic architecture, and the architect Nina Akhvlediani, project author, is really worked very hard to keep this authenticity, because building has really a very unique interior design as well as exterior, as you see, and it was usually mainly built for the purpose of having the like to preserve the silk production knowledge and sericulture knowledge in the region. And to go back to the recent, focusing on the recent collaborations, one of our recent collaboration is this show which Alaina mentioned, which I was very gladly co-curated with her. But I just want to underline that this show was made to be realistically possible because of the Alaina's residency, which was in the framework of Art Prospect Network residencies, supported by CC Arts Link. And we are partnering this organization from 2018. My former colleague and friend Data Shergelashvili was actively involved to get this connection with the Art Prospect Network, and we did very important, nice projects did together. But this is one of our last collaboration and the very successful show, I can say. And the show itself is focusing Alaina's research of the glass plate negatives, and especially we were focusing on the silkworm life cycle, because we believe that this is not only the precious animal like insect which is producing this silk, but also very important creature, which can be, broadly speaking, can be analyzed from different angle, even when we are speaking about the power and human dominancy through the decades of the regimes. It's very useful to see how these images are created. This is the how the exposition of the show. It's 47 images we selected for the display, but mainly they are the microscopic glass plate negatives, as I mentioned, and I'm really glad that we did this to happen, because these images, for me personally, is also very aesthetically very nice and very beautiful in that way that for example, it is sometimes very abstract image, sometimes very particular focus on the insect and the silk form. I will just show you different kind of the types of the life stages of the silk form briefly. And this is, for example, the pupa inside the cocoon, and this is the process on the right side, how the silkworm is spinning and creating the cocoon. And all these images are, for me, and I'm sure for the generally for the audience, are giving the impression how this insect creates not only the very precious product as a silk, but also how the human observes this. And after looking through these documentations, which are mainly the Soviet time documentation research-based material and microscopic research-based images, how these images currently we can observe as an artistic work and evocates us to see all this symmetry and aesthetic, evokes us to think about art and science in a very multiple way. And this is very important to mention, that all these images are accessible right now because of the previous collaboration, which is like a very precious collaboration with artist Olaf Nicolai and curator Nina Akhvlediani, and I'm happy that they are together present and they have possibility to join to our talk. Because my precious colleague Salome Pachuashvili, collection curator, was very much involved during the digitization process of this glass plate negatives, because we have it like huge amount in the collection preserved, and it's not only about the life cycle of the silkworm. There are 12 different themes about the sericulture, which is covered by this glass plate negatives. And this is the image of from the exhibition Casting and Echo, Architecture of Sericulture. And I'm sure about this project and about the outcome of this project, Nina and Olaf will talk more. And yeah, this is right now from my side, just to emphasize all these connections. And this is the from the chronologically how we begin to have more access, to have more possibility. And we are very much happy that after years, we, like our resident curator Alaina, did the focus and research on these glass plate negatives, and we had this possibility to to work together. I'm just stop sharing. I hope I don't really make it over time. And now, yeah, Olaf can continue about his focus and his artistic research about the connection about the museum in this particular collection.
Thank you so much, Mariam. So next we'll move on to Olaf, and Nina will be presenting a slide as well. So maybe Nina, you want to start sharing screen?
Hello, everyone. Just double checking, is the presentation visible or Okay, so Olaf can start the conversation then.
Okay, thank you for the invitation, and thank you also, Mariam, for elaborating the context a bit better. I want to just shortly talk about how I got involved in this whole project, because I'm based in Berlin, as it was said, and it's not a natural point of view that I am, as a German artist based in Berlin, working in Tbilisi. So I had a chance to visit Tbilisi several times, and in 2016, when I was invited by the Goethe-Institut there, I had also several occasions to see institutions which were very interested in collaborating with contemporary artists and also make contemporary art visible, which means especially in Tbilisi, the initiative of a lot of private initiatives, a lot of people who really do that. The SIG Museum is one of the rare official institutions who really was participating in this kind of initiative. And when I was in Tbilisi, I encountered the question of silk and textile more or less in a very awkward way. I was visiting an institution, the ICA, and there was a huge pile of books which were thrown away, which you can use. And these books were collected on the streets of Tbilisi. And the ICA initiated the process doing something with the books and objects. So I was browsing through the books because I'm very interested in books. And I found 2 copies which were published by the textile industry, or by a company for textile industry in Tbilisi. One was published in the end of the 20s and one was published in the end of the 30s. So they looked totally different. In the beginning and the end of the 20s, they had a constructivist, smaller Lisitsky design. At the end of the 30s, they looked very banal and very strange. What happened between was that the great terror started by storming, and they only really changed everything, also killed a lot of intellectuals, also found a totally different way how industry, ideology, and the whole society was restructured. So you could see, just in the design of these 2 little books, a huge change. And that is how I get, as an artist, interested in things. I see objects I encounter as echoes of very complex things. And that I want to listen to the melodies which are these echoes creating, and also try to introduce another melody to create other echoes. So that's why also casting an echo was the title of the show. And then the SIG Museum invited me to have a possibility to do something there, a piece. I found that the whole space is so special and has so much potential echoes that it would be a bit stupid just to produce an artwork and bring it there, or to produce an artwork just using these things as objects for a collage of own artworks. I really wanted to do something what was related to my own art practices and really did something to reflect what is this space where I am, what is there, what is the function, what are the possibilities. So what I propose is that I can develop a publication format where the SIG Museum can present itself in a way as it is needed. So publication is a practice which I really love as an artist as well. So, and then when I started to think about it, I also thought it would be very good to have as an initial project to document and to save and to digitalize one part of these amazing collections which are there. And at that time, I also met Nina, and I was fascinated by her initiative DINEBA, where she really tried to do all these kind of things, making archives accessible, trying to show how archives are the active part of producing, and also how you can really deal with a heritage as something what guides you into the future. And so I was asking her to help me not only with this, really to go through this process and also to design it with me. And so it came out that we did 2 different things. The first thing was the digitalizing, which started and was funded very much also by the Goethe-Institut. And the second was that we developed an exhibition and also the first number of the publication, which is SERI. I have here the second number. I just bought the second because there is also the first time printed the life of the silkworm, what now is in the exhibition. So, and that was the way of bringing these things to life. the interesting thing was from the beginning that I understood that the museum is not just a museum. There must be something more. When you encounter it, you see that this is just a depot of so many different activities. And the sericulture station was really an economical and political enterprise in a big scale. And that is also something what made me thinking. I encountered when I traveled to Cambodia in Phnom Penh, an artist initiative called Sasa. And when I went to see the temples of Angkor Wat, the artists recommended me to see some of their former colleagues, because what they established there was a farm for silkworms. And they started to a silk production. They were so successful because of the people who visit Angkor Wat, and they were also shopping for these kind of little things what they produced, that they could finance at the end a school where people could learn techniques again. So it was an economical enterprise at the end, what helped a lot to re-establish silk production. This is also something what is a very special thing to know. Georgia was a country with a huge textile industry. If you now look at this, I think there's nobody working anymore in the textile industry. Only some artists try to revive this and try to do that on a little scale. But so the potential of such an institution of the Silk Museum is much more than just being a point for artistic references and research. It could be also something what reaches out to educational platforms, which could be much bigger. So this is something also why the publication format was seen as something what communicate dreams, projects, objects. And so the subtitle of this seria, what is the title of the publication, is Sericulture Station Papers, Research, Poetry and Archive. So, and especially the poetry aspect, I think is something what I'm very interested in, because that makes you dreaming of something what can happen. And so the whole starting point was a little bit like diving into something very poetic. And what Nina is browsing through right now is how we conceptualized the first issue of Seria. We documented the state of the Silk Museum as it was at the time when we worked on it, which is now already in itself a historical document. And this, what you see now, this image is how I saw the first time the class negatives when I visited. And so what is this? And then Mariam and Salome, they showed me this, and I was totally fascinated, but none of them was really properly printed, and also how it was storage. It has a certain charm, but I think if you really want to keep it for longer, you need it in a different way as well. So, and so the whole thing came about from this. And then the whole thing with the documentation was also an idea to invite the artist Giovanna Silva, a friend of us. And so it was also a big collaboration in the end to document a certain moment in time, which is very important, because it's like a time where something is very changing, because it's now under reconstruction. And I guess Mariam can say much more about it than I, that we don't know what will happen in the future with the whole thing. Just to give you a little an impression, which is also reflected in one of the publications, this whole sericulture station was an urbanistic project which was so big that you can talk about a little village. The famous stadium where the Bastiani Club is was part as an area of it. Not there's a huge park which was part of it. So, and all of this is really in a very double sense an imperial project. So, and that was a little bit the thing what kept me in the beginning. It caught me, and I did not know exactly what it is, and then slowly dived into it. And with the help of all the people from the Silk Museum, especially with Nina's help, it was possible, and with the Goethe-Institut support, to create a publication format and much more, as we can see now from there is going on. Like we have this exhibition here. I think there are more initiatives coming, and that is something what makes you very happy when you can do things like that, that the echoes are not only there, that you hear them, that you produce new sounds as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olaf. That was really, really wonderful. Nina, I believe you are next.
Hello again. It's a pleasure to take over after Olaf, and he did a great introduction. It pretty much covered everything. But I will try to expand more onto, I will tell you a bit more about the next two issues that we produced of this publication that he mentioned, as well as a little bit about the exhibition that we worked on together. We started the collaboration in 2019. That's the date you encountered at the beginning of this presentation. That's the time when we invited also Giovanna to document the collections. And since then, our focus was the publication series. The first issue was dedicated entirely to the history of the sericulture station, as well as it included a text by Olaf reflecting on the history, and he had his own take on it, let's say. And then the second issue was conceived as part of a larger project that we were part of, which was at the Hauskultur der Welt at HKW in Berlin. And this project was dedicated to archives and how artists and curators can engage with archives and produce their own works and installations, and later on it also developed into a series of talks. And we had the pleasure of presenting the second issue there of the publication series. And the second issue included, it was more of a focus on the glass plate negatives collection for the first time. And as Olaf mentioned, this SERI has subcategories describing different topics and themes that we cover. So we wanted to try out and touch upon the section about poetry. And similarly to him, my interest also lies in this sphere, not only poetry, but also translations. So for the second issue, where we included some of the images of the silkworm's life cycle, we also printed a text from 1992 by a Danish author, Inger Christensen, where she writes about silk. The title is The Silk, the Universe, Language, and the Heart. And she in turn references Chinese philosopher Lu Qi, who had a poetical text about silk as well. And she references a line which is in the thread of silk, there's an infinite universe. So that was a beautiful line for us also to touch upon and to open up a conversation how this publishing platform can be used, especially as time went by and the museum was closed under reconstruction. This gave us an opportunity and to support the museum in their activities to continue their work and collaboration with curators and artists. And with time, and now that we have already the third issue, it's proving to be a very important project also for us as curators and artists, as well as for the institution, I suppose, because it has had particular resonance. It had these series of publications have been presented in various cities and countries, and they have evolved into exhibition formats as well. The way I see it is that the book is the starting point, and from then outwards, we have the chance to present the materials that are printed inside into a smaller exhibition formats. This slide at the moment that is on the screen is an image of a glass negative that depicts a close study of silk threads. And this is the collection that we chose to focus on the third issue of SERI. And this is the third issue here that I'm holding in my hand. We haven't had an official launch yet. So we had an informal launch and presentation in Vilnius at the Contemporary Art Museum there, but we intend to do a more thorough presentation in Tbilisi in July. And the third issue gives us, it's a good example of how the platform also allows external curators to come in and take over. And they're given complete freedom to conceptualize the issue. And in this case, we have invited an artist and filmmaker, Furkat Palvanzadeh to work on the third issue. We had a friendly connection with him because he had lived in Tbilisi and he knew about the museum. And at the moment, he's based in the US, but he retained the connection to Tbilisi by running several platforms, including a platform called Tashkent-Tbilisi Connection. And sometimes we collaborate screening films here in Tbilisi and several other events and projects that we work on together. But this SERI was a great touching point and a great possibility for us to work with him. And what we've decided was to start to have these negatives as a starting point, and then we developed a conversation. We chose authors and the participants who take part in the third issue, and this Silk Threads was a inspiration also to select one of the texts by Tim Ingold. Tim Ingold is an anthropologist, a writer who is also interested in archaeology. And he writes a lot about lines and threads and how it connects different, that it's everywhere, connecting everything to everything, everybody to everybody. So what we decided to do was to create a travelogue of like 3 travelogues across Eurasia for the third issue. So this allowed us to invite artists that reflect on different cities, locations, across Eurasia. One such example is a contribution by Rusbeh Akbari, who is an Iranian artist who happened to be in Tbilisi in the residency at the Silk Museum. So that was a nice connection to invite someone that had seen the archives and collections at the Silk Museum. And he contributed his research about an abandoned silk factory in Iran, which had become a migration point for birds that has become its main purpose. But not only, he discusses the politics and the ownership of this factory and how the government is trying to sell it and change the natural setting around the factory. As you see here in the aerial photographs, there is a severe deforestation happening there, which is like intentional for the purpose of selling the property. There were other contributors, an artist and researcher, Olia Korsun, traveled to Uzbekistan, where she interviewed and made a film about women who still work in a factory there producing silk. As it has been mentioned earlier, the silk production has stopped in Georgia, but it's nice to reflect on countries that have still retained the industry, and this craft is the knowledge is still kept and is passed on through the generations. And these conversations with these women were quite interesting as a documentation in itself in the publication. These are film stills from her film that Olia produced in Uzbekistan. And finally, the third contributor is Peter Paul Podovan, who is researching pigments in Afghanistan, and particularly a very rare pigment of lapis lazuli, a blue pigment that is excavated there and mined. And he was researching the logistics behind it, of how these precious pigments are transported later on into Europe and sold, etc. The mention of pigments, the mention of is important because we try to connect it back to the museum's collection. As it has been mentioned, the Silk Museum has a vast collection of different items, and including there is a very unique collection of pigments there as well. So we try to connect these lines, but of course these lines are quite abstract as well. But the series allows us to involve as many artists as we can, as many curators as we can, and to continue this activity. And later on, we have discussed that with the next issues, there is a possibility that the Silk Museum will continue this activity on their own and retain the format. And it could be that the series becomes even more systematic, reporting ongoingly about their work and projects, because the institution has a very important input in even in the contemporary art scene here in Tbilisi. So I really hope that they will continue these projects and exhibitions, and especially after they open in October this year. Yes, I will end. Sorry, this is one other image of Peter Paul's work related to lapis lazuli pigment. And the covers of the first two issues, I will end with this, because I feel that the covers are also very beautiful in their own way. So thank you very much, and I pass the word to Alaina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. This is really wonderful to have those visuals and for us to kind of see more of the interior of the institution and how you've built it out and connected all these literal threads. I just wanted to ask a few questions before we open it up to everyone. What I've noticed in all of your work in thinking about the State Silk Museum and this particular collection is that there's a desire to expand it in some way. Like Nina, for example, you're making connections to artists from Iran, from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan. Mariam, you've been working on the partnerships through CEC ArtsLink and Art Prospect. And Olaf, you've been coming back from Germany many, many times and also thinking about distribution through other formats, through publications, through exhibitions. So there's something very special about the State Silk Museum in Tbilisi that is very locally rooted, but at the same time, very international. And I think we'd be remiss not to consider the contemporary politics of Georgia and a kind of like imperial desire of Russia to perhaps like encroach back on that territory, or to imagine, reimagine the Soviet Union today. And so I wanted to ask you all if you could think or you could say something to this kind of internationalism and openness of the museum and the ways maybe particularly funding structures have enabled or disabled you to do certain things. For example, funding funding that frames Georgia as perhaps part of the EU. We used our funding from CUNY to support the publication and to support Mariam's research in the exhibition. And Olaf, you're bringing in Goethe-Institut, and I think Nina, maybe the British Library helped you at some point, or a British institution. So I just wanted to think about the funding structures, the openness of this museum, and the contemporary politics of today, and how you think of that.
Can I start? Okay, so thank you for raising up this very urgent issue, because what is happening in our country right now, it's a very shaked situation in terms of politics, and this new law of the foreign agency takes the things very complicated, I can say, and also not only for the cultural sector, but in general the civil society sector, because it's very non-democratic to oppose such kind of an imperialistic and going back to the imperialistic pressure on the country, which is just trying to be more open. And I can say from the institutional perspective that you mentioned very correctly that all these collaborations, all these institutional connections or individual researches is rooted and is based on the openness of the institution. And I just want to emphasize that, for example, the context of the museum and it was always connected to the politics, and it is very much the knowledge and the structure and all the contextual material which we are preserving was always political and still is very political. When I mentioned that, for example, going back to the history from the museum, which is very much connected to the Russian imperialism, and nowadays, for example, contemporary museum, how can reanalyze this narrative, let's say, what we are trying actively from 2016, and but beforehand also it should be mentioned that this institution was preserved because of the international tension and international, let's say, underlining of the importance of this institution. And it's go back to the, just I will briefly say that it's go back to the story of the Georgian textile group, which was the main like core heart and initiator to preserve this institution from demolition given in the 90s when was the crisis in Georgia. So all this story, all these different historical layers build up not only to localize this institution and the knowledge, but the threads, the network, which is the metaphor of the silk for sure. And this openness, I can say that is very much based to the persons who are working here. And I would like to emphasize our current director, Nina Akhvlediani, who is like the also core initiator to develop all these connections. And it's very important how this institution is ruled, how horizontal we are at this moment still. And because of the pressure of the state politics, how it might be getting more isolated, that we might lose these connections. And this is non-safe zone, what is happening right now. It's my just short sharing the short observation. And yeah, thank you for raising up this very urgent question. I don't know if our friends would like also to add something on that side, on their side.
Maybe just to elaborate briefly that as Mariam mentioned, the museum and the team behind the museum throughout the years have been working on preservation, whereas the international community and foundation and organizations would support financially. And when they would come in and they'd support the museum, only afterwards the state ministries or the state funds would also come as co-funders, or they got a sense of the importance of the collection only afterwards. So this is what has been happening, even with the glass negatives collection of this more than 1,500 glass negatives that were conserved. That was done by the international funders. And you mentioned the British Library. It's in fact the project of endangered archives run by the British Library that funded the conservation of the glass negatives collection at the museum. So international funding has been key in this matter, in preserving the collections, making them accessible, because these collections are out in open source and available digitally for people to consult, and this is quite recent. This funding has been supporting international artists and curators who come to Tbilisi to work in the museum collection and archives. So all this is slowly being jeopardized because even though the law that Mariam mentioned, the purpose of it is to oversee who's funding the media and the political, like NGOs that could interfere in the political context and the election processes in Georgia. It has quite a larger impact on all types of funding that comes in, especially in the cultural field, because institutions, the foundations and funders, I think, might not be keen to including Georgia in their regional sphere of funding, let's say. I don't know if Olaf wants to add something about this. He has been studying the context here for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I mean, what was really astonishing for me when you visit Georgia and you engage with the scene there, how strong the scene is based on the activity of the civic society. I mean, everybody there is doing these things much more really as an initiative, as a private thing. And then you have institutions like the Silk Museum who are helping. And it's a huge scene there of people who do a lot of things, super active. And they need the support because some of them could not do anything, but they do it anyhow. But they have and they make themselves visible. And they have a very, very long tradition. Georgia is one of the most important cultural hubs for that, what we call European culture. And I don't know, not speaking about only today. So, and that is something with this new law is really under pressure, and on this also a sign of geopolitical situation, which to pay attention to how fragile these moments are when a civic society try to structure democratic values and try to engage in cultural values in a system beyond totalitarianistic styles. And that is something what you can see now. This fight is going on, and it is very good to see this, that it gets awareness. I can remember when Georgia in the 90s was in a civil war, that in Europe not that many people paid attention to that. It was not very well known. It was not in the news at all. Now the news are full of this because of the perspective that Georgia could maybe join the European Union. And this is something what, of course, has also tricky moments. I don't want to idealize this whole process of getting into the Western economical system. There are other contradictions as well. But first, there's this choice of freedom and culture, which is there. And that I really see under fire now. And when you look how many people were on the streets protesting, I mean, show me somewhere else where people are that much fighting for that what they want to have, and the government is ignoring it. That was the last time when you look to the Arab countries, what happened to them. It was really that also there were so many people on the streets saying we want a different kind of civil society. And I think I see it in this much wider context that we are in a field where you have to fight for your rights.
Thank you. And to add, I think it's important to remember that the contemporary situation is just a part of the kind of longue durée of questions around imperialism and colonialism, and also a continuation of this kind of East-West tension. Yeah, I mean, it's as cultural workers, as artists, as museum curators, as independent publishers and independent curators, we all also play a political role in kind of defining and highlighting certain aspects of contemporary politics through aesthetics. So I think we're all really drawn to the State Silk Museum, and we all are, enamored by its collection and very attracted to it. But we all also really want to help it and preserve it, but also make it more open and have, just a wider audience as well, which actually also brings me to the question in the chat. So maybe we will go to that now. Bogdana, I don't know if you want to read it or you would like me to read it. Perhaps I'll read it. Oh, no, okay.
I can read the question. Yeah, I am a current resident at the Silk Museum. I just started my residency. And my question is how hard it is to engage a wider public to the events at the museum due to its very specific theme, especially considering that there is no silk production anymore in Georgia and little connection to the topic. And I know that museum is under construction for a couple of years now, but the past experience and maybe current events as well. Yeah, I appreciate the answer.
Thank you so much. Maybe Mariam, you'd like to take that as the representative of the museum.
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question, Bogdana. And yeah, that's true that it's always, especially in the contemporary times, it's always very big challenge how to influence wider public to come to the museums, and especially when the context that you are very niche in a way to be the Silk Museum. But as I mentioned already while I have the introduction about the museum, it's not only about the textile or like only about the very scientific knowledge about the silk, but symbolizing this knowledge from the historical point of view, natural science point of view. Aesthetically also it connects to the art and culture in a broader sense. And while you are digging through the collection, you understand, I mean, when you are working there, starting working or researching there, you will just understand that these are the whole different multi-layer perspectives you can develop and engage audience to be part of it. And for example, I just want to say, not to be very abstract, I just want to say that, for example, in 2016, we started to have a new policy as a contemporary museum to engage the curators and artists to help us to make a wider programs. Like contemporary art became one of the core to develop further researches, and that's how we build up all these connections. Before, also way before, when the museum became as a museum, at that time they are starting to provide the new educational programs. So it's not only about the preserving, but also the knowledge sharing throughout the exhibitions and educational programs, which gave us the possibility to reach out to the local schools, international audience, artists, curators, and wide range of the variety of the public. And it is very important for us to be in this process very open, to not only to dedicated to study something or to share our own perspective, but also to learn from the audience, also from the researchers or all the external resources we are collaborating. That's why I mean that to engage more people, you need to have more multiple perspectives. And we are trying this, and you are here, so you will be the next to provide something new for us.
That is very smart to reach out to multiple spheres and connect with them. Thank you for your answer.
And Nina and Olaf, maybe you could expound on that through your own initiatives, and how you are able to, widen the public in Berlin and, throughout the kind of Central and Western Asia.
At the beginning that it was very much helpful, and it leads back to this question of this new law, how the Goethe-Institut was involved in this whole process. They initiated me to come there, but also they supported very much this whole SERI thing. But not only this, they also collaborated with Haus der Kultur und der Welt, what Nina was referring to, and so in this big archive. And it was very something what makes it contextualized in a huge field of initiatives working with archives as the field of production, to keep the knowledge and to use it as a resource. And I think this is also something what is very important in countries like Georgia, where this knowledge has very much to do with the identity. So, it is really creating a very strong base for identity and these kind of things. And when you walk around the Silk Museum, there are so many little things where you can connect with people on a very different level. Not far from the Silk Museum, there used to be a building where now the Tbilisi bank is in. That was a very Soviet-style shopping mall. They had textile there. You find in the Silk Museum photographs now deposited there from some other archives about this whole shopping mall or this kind of department store. So, and a lot of people you talk to in Tbilisi, they remember this department store. They have stories about it. Or if you go up to there are free markets, they're full of textile things. When you just ask, where are these textiles coming from? Who is producing them? So you can connect it to some photographs in the Silk Museum. Then you look, why do they have photos from Japan here? Why do they have photos from China here? So they sent all their photographers all over the places where textile industry was going on. You have a huge resource where you can understand political, economical things on a daily basis, which you're engaged directly right now. Why is somebody shopping there at the flea market? Why are the prices so low there? Where is this coming from? How comes it here? Where it's going to? So, and this is something what I see also there as a huge possibility, and the museum is very well located. And in one of the texts, which is a very poetical text, I had also this fantasy. You can engage with the stadium, you can engage with the club there, you can engage with everybody in the city when you want, because it gives you the moment. The thread is very long that you can weave it.
I would add that the museum has been an important space as well. I would like to mention that public museums in Tbilisi, they're not quite open to inviting artists, especially contemporary artists, to show their work and curate exhibitions. And the Silk Museum has an exhibition space, quite a large one, where there have been exhibitions ongoingly held and curated. And this in itself is a very important aspect of the museum. Despite its collection, despite its archives, this has its own history throughout the years as well, its exhibition records, and it has developed particular connections as well. And just to end my comment, I'd say that the question by Bogdana about is how to engage with the archives and how to engage with this particular theme in the museum, I think there are multiple possibilities. And one such example is one of our contributors from SERI, the third issue, Rozbeh Akhbari, that I mentioned. He did a residency as well, just like you at the Silk Museum. And his output and his results after his residency was a text that he wrote with Felix Kalmussen. And the text tells about the founding of the museum, its collection, especially with a focus on Nikolai Shaurov, the founder. But having read it, I wanted to use it as a research source, as a basis for one of the issues of SERI, and later I found out that it was a completely fictional text that he has devised together with Felix. And this is something that the museum team has shared with me. So the poetic aspect to it, the fictional aspects to it, there are multiple possibilities in ways you can engage with the collections and archives of particular themes and topics.
Olaf, Nina, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you for your question. We have another question in the chat. It's from Alex Tell. Alex, do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
Oh, I can read it. I think you guys have sort of started to touch on a lot of this already, but there's just this phrase Olaf used, I think, in relation to Nina's discussion of archives, is like archives being this active force. And I really appreciated the discussions of all the different sort of ways that you all have activated this archive in different media and bringing it to new locations of display. So I was just wondering what you all hoped for the future of this archive. And I think you've all sort of begun to touch on that with different ideas of new modes of interpretation, but just sort of thinking in terms of longevity, what do you see moving forward?
Thanks, Alex. That's a great question. One we had thought we would touch on as well. So I'm glad you asked it. I'll just say briefly, Mariam and I, the exhibition that we produced is the photos that we printed in New York, which is, I think, the first time they're actually printed on Hahnemühle, very nice ink print, is we're actually donating them back to the Silk Museum so that the photos will, have a home and, be back in their original home as well. And Mariam and I are also talking about a possible Silk Museum in Southeast Asia that also wants to show them. So continuing the kind of to follow the path of globalization that the Silk Road, first initiated, I think we are trying to continue to spread the kind of internationalism of these images.
I can just add this because it's a very important that the archival activization is very important for us still because our team is hardly work not only the digitizing this process but also to find out the new collaborants, and all the time we are having the research and it's very interesting that once you get this accessibility to the archival material, then you get the multiple feedbacks, how it might be connected to some academic research or artistic research or such kind of a curatorial research. And this is what is on the display in the Mishkin Gallery is a very interesting example how this could be reached out of the new geographical area, absolutely new and wider audience who never heard probably about the Silk Museum. When you are in Europe and you can have the SERI on your hand, you also have the absolutely new perspective and information. So these are exhibition is one let's say, the possibility. Publication is another possibility to work through this archival material to spread up throughout the world. But we are for sure definitely eager to continue such collaborations and like having up new perspectives for that. And recently, we are also very eager to, after the reopening of the museum, to have the temporary exhibitions of the whole of these research projects, which we have did during the restoration time. And we are now framing all these materials to get together, to be displayed, and to be somehow accessible for the local audience too, because it's also very important to have like again audience at the museum too, not only the traveling exhibitions but also like here in Tbilisi too.
There's really one thing what I really want to add. The archive in itself is really a treasure, not because it is from the past and we admire it and it gives us something what we don't have anymore. It is very important that it is possible, and this is one of my hope for the futures, that all this material what is there can be archived in a way that it is very long, good, accessible, that it is digitalized, that it is there, because in the future, other people will deal with the archive and they will have totally different perspectives towards it. So what we also do by keeping the archive in a way that it is very good and accessible, organized, we give a tool to the future generations that they can deal and activate it. If we just deal with the archive from our point of view and structuring only from there, then it is limiting it in its capacity. To keep this potential power of the archive, you need to try to use the best technologies and the best fundings to do that. And I think this is a point what needs to be highlighted as well. This can an institution like the Silk Museum not provide by itself. It needs substantial help, and normally it needs fundings from the state for this. If it is not there, other institutions have to do it. So we come back to a point what we already discussed. And that is something what is very, very important to keep in mind. We also talk about the economical base of archiving. This is, when it is not there, everything is wishful thinking.
I will add something as well. Because of this economical aspect, I had to set up a moving digitizing studio, which we set up on site depending on the need of the project. And it has become a habit. It has become part of the curatorial work that I do. And this has been the case with the Silk Museums project, with SERI as well. And we try to adapt. We try to adapt to every certain situation, but at a small scale. Of course, it is advisable to have the support and finances to develop larger infrastructures within the institutions, within the museums that could provide the possibilities of conserving and digitizing and for future generations, as Olaf has mentioned. So, yes.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Mariam, Nina, Olaf. Mariam, I wish you best of luck on the renovation and reopening, and Nina on the 3rd issue of SERI, and Olaf on your exhibition, which opens very soon, I imagine, in Athens. Thank you all again so much for joining us and for these really valuable and important insights on the State Silk Museum and this special collection of glass plate negatives. Again, this is the last week to see the show in New York, but as we've heard, there are so many ways to engage and encounter this special museum. And I encourage you all to continue to follow the State Silk Museum and my fellow panelists on on the production of all of their very, very important work. So thank you again, and have a good day, afternoon, evening, morning. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.